So welcome everyone to the Rethinking Social Housing webinar. So today we'll be talking about digital transformation. And before we get started on the sort of formal presentation, we'll, as we've been doing already, just give you an opportunity to get to know one another, for us to get to know you as well. And as I said a couple of minutes ago, found that having worked in the social housing sector for a while now and working with clients within the sector, well at BDO, that it is a very collaborative sector. There's lots of good practice sharing among members within the sector, and use this as an opportunity as much to learn from us as to learn from one another as well. So if you can pop a little bit about yourself in the chat, as long as if you want to, your name, the organisation that you work in, and your role, and then also a couple of things, one or two things that you want to leave today, having either found out or questions that you'd like to have answered. So there'll also be Q&A at the end. We'll leave ample time to go through any questions that come up throughout. So please feel free to use the Q&A function on Zoom as well. So I'll give you a couple of quick minutes to pop your name, organisation, and a couple of things you'd like to learn in the chat, and then we'll get started. So thanks, Rachel. Hi, Claire. Thanks for joining. And as I say, if there's anything that you want to kind of chip in with throughout as well, the chat will be available. We'll be trying to monitor it as much as possible throughout the session. If we don't get to anything, then please feel free to nudge us within the chat and we'll get to it. Yeah, feel free to jump in throughout. Okay, so I think we'll get started. So welcome to the session. My name's Chris Milborrow. I'm a senior manager within our digital transformation team. Background, having worked in housing in both an in-house and advisory role, primarily focused on ERP and technology, IT. And since joining BDO, have worked with a number of different housing associations, both in a hands-on project management type role, working with New Gorbals, who we'll come on to in a second within our case study, and also within a project assurance and advisory role. So working with organisations to effectively from a distance understand whether their projects are set up for success, doing in-flight and post-project reviews as well to make sure that projects landed correctly and that they were delivering the benefits that they expected to deliver. We've also got Parul Anand from our VAT team. So Parul's a director in that team and a social housing specialist. So Parul will speak to us at the end of the session about some of the VAT considerations and some of the support that the VAT team at BDO can offer. Finance is often a key component of any ERP implementation, any technology implementation, and VAT is a crucial component within that that the team at BDO have been specialising in and supporting organisations to deliver. So we'll hear from Parul at the end, just before the Q&A. So as I mentioned, one of the clients that we've been working with recently is a Glasgow-based housing association called New Gorbals Housing Association. So New Gorbals are an organisation with about 2,500 rented properties. They've got an in-house DLO repairs team, and they also offer factoring and service charge services to both rented and private sector landlords within Glasgow. So the situation that New Gorbals had when we first engaged with them is that they had outgrown their legacy systems. They were coming to end of life, and they were looking at costly and laborious upgrades to existing legacy systems and applications, particularly the housing management, finance, repairs and asset systems. So we went in and engaged with the team, and from November 21, I've been working with Mary, the finance head of finance, and the wider team at New Gorbals to effectively deliver digital transformation across a number of different areas. So that included data management training, process analysis and redesign, specification and selection. So we supported them with their procurement activity, and also project and change management support, and some ad hoc support as we went through the project, which I'll come on to in a sec. So it's a bit of a timeline in terms of the support that we gave New Gorbals as they progressed through this kind of journey that they've been on with new systems, new processes, and new ways of working. So the first engagement that we had with New Gorbals was actually not really related to systems and technology implementation. It was more related to data management, and it really came out of management's understanding and realization that while they were looking at how they could improve their systems landscape, the role of a lot of the roles within the organization had become very data heavy. They'd become roles where we relied on and also were responsible for managing huge amounts of data. So management asked us to come in and to deliver some all staff and management training relating to data management. So it covered really some basic premises and theories and concepts around master reference and transactional data management. And I think some of the outcomes from that were really positive. The management team, particularly kind of at an operational level, really got a full understanding of how the data that they were managing impacts the rest of the business. And some of the good practice elements that we managed to fold into that training, we started to see be adopted across the organisation. And I think one of the things that I've realised and noticed over the last few years is that a lot of roles within the sector have changed from very paper-based manual roles to be more digital-led and more data-oriented. So we have so much data now within organisations, and the people who are managing that data, responsible for it, and are processing that data, have often never been given that overview of why it's important, what their role and responsibility is relating to it, and some of the concepts and theories that underpin that from an organizational master data management perspective. So that went down really well with the business. We then worked with operational management to do a bit of a data analysis and understand key processes and how data quality was impacted and influenced by those processes. So we looked at the organization's core housing and finance data and produced some outputs that helped an initial data cleanse before we even started looking at systems. We also worked with the business to develop as-is processes, which were, I suppose, aspirational to an extent at that point. But what that allowed us to do was to present those as-is processes, and then look at what the to-be was. So, we want our processes to get from A to B, and we want you as a systems vendor to allow us to achieve B. So how can you do that? And it was really to push on to the systems suppliers that were in the procurement process, our expectations, and to give them a framework to work within to allow us to determine whether their system could allow us to achieve those to-be processes. And I think that was, again, a really positive process for the team to go on to understand what good could look like even before we started to look at new systems. We then, the organisation then selected Designer Software Limited to deliver their housing management, asset repairs and finance system. So we were then brought in to support the organisation to mobilise and then project manage the implementation. So really that was everything from supporting in the development of the project plan, project initiation documentation, benefits lists and requirements, and also crucially at this point we supported management to determine what the team sizing, roles and responsibilities and governance arrangements would be around the project. So the reason why that's so important, I think, is housing associations, RSLs aren't always the largest organisations, right? Not just got people sitting around waiting to do big transformation projects. And I think that's always a challenge that the organisations that I work with in the sector grapple with is, do we bring people in to do this? Do we take people off their full-time roles? Do we try and do this alongside BAU? And I guess the answer to that is, and we'll come on to it in a few slides, is there is no one size fits all approach to this. There's no silver bullet. So what we helped New Gorbals understand was how could they do this best. What we ended up doing was developing an SME work stream lead type approach, where we had myself as the project manager, we had a project sponsor and a project board that sat above that project team. And we then had people from the business come in, and a part of their role, a part of their BAU task list was taken away from them. They were given some time away to do the project, and they became the core project team with the responsibility of delivering the key tasks within the implementation. But as I say, that was an ongoing discussion and process with management to make sure that we got that team sizing right, and that we were very clear with not only the people within the team, but also in the business as to what those roles and responsibilities would be for the people that were involved. Throughout the project, this was a very tight, ambitious project timeline. We delivered this from around April, May time and delivered in October, November. So, even the supplier, DSL, when we were talking about timeline initially, thought it was ambitious and were quite aware of the risks around that timeline. But the way that we mobilised the project allowed us to deliver that, albeit with some additional support required along the way. So in May 2022, we supported with some of the key finance tasks. So cleansing of supplier data, for example. We just helped bolster the team's capacity and go in and support with some of the key tasks around delivering that. And then also in asset data migration. So we're working with significant volumes of data from an asset perspective. So we supported the team with some of our own kind of in-house capabilities to go in and just make that process slightly less arduous, and again went in and worked really closely alongside the team to get that over the line. We're now in the process, we've now delivered phase one and the process of supporting with phase two. And from October 22, we'd basically been looking at, we had those 2B processes. We did align to them pretty closely, but also there's a lot of, now given that the systems are far more, effective for cross-organisation working, we're now looking at how do those key end-to-end processes work across different departments. So there's been a lot of process analysis, business analysis, looking at, for example, the repairs end-to-end process, which has touch points both within obviously repairs and maintenance. It has contractors, both internal and some smaller contractors outside of the business being involved. And then there's also a heavy finance component of the repairs process. And that's all now being done within one system, within one process. And it's really about understanding, what are the various touch points and handoffs, and how do we get the organisation speaking to one another better in order to make that as seamless a process as possible. And we've done that, developed SOPs to support those processes and also detailed process maps. So a few key successes, which I've touched on already, having gone through the sort of chronology of our support with New Gorbals. I think, the first one obviously is being able to deliver the phase one in 8 months. That timeline, as I said, was pretty ambitious. I think, that's from really mobilisation. I think if you look at it from a sort of a delivery perspective, it was actually shorter than that. And the team had a bit of a burning platform. They had solutions that were going out of support. They were going to be costly to renew, and we knew that we had to try and get there in that short time scale, and we managed to do that. I think another key success from this project was that from day one, the management at New Gorbals were completely bought into the process and were very vocal and visible around that buy-in. So, there was a real strong tone at the top for this project. There was a strong governance process where we had a project board, which was made up of senior members of the staff team. And they were really good at challenging, making sure that we were on track, and also ensuring that any issues that were arising at a project team that were escalated to them were resolved quickly. So we had a few issues and challenges around resourcing and capacity, which you expect throughout a project like this. And those were addressed really swiftly, which was great and allowed us to complete the project successfully. we also have already touched on project mobilisation. You know, that piece around everyone being in it together, everyone being on the same page when it came to scope, timeline. You know, we were going to do a phased approach, so just making sure that everyone was aware of what was being delivered when was really important as well. Staff involvement and ownership. You know, this is something that it goes back to the original point that I made around staff sizing and team sizing and roles and responsibilities. And I think one of the key components of getting your team sizing right is not necessarily about the level or the grade of the person that's getting involved, particularly from a subject matter expert perspective, but it's what they're able to do, right? So we had some members of the team, our project team, who they weren't at a management level within their operational department, but they had the trust of their colleagues to either make decisions, design decisions and configuration decisions, and the authority to do so, or to go back and escalate that quickly within the department to make sure that they got a decision quickly so that they didn't delay any of the design and configuration tasks. And then the last point there is a really clear understanding of benefits. So we completed the phase one and did a comprehensive benefits realization review where we effectively looked at, you know, we said we were going to deliver these pieces of functionality and these benefits throughout the project. Did we do that? And if we didn't, then how were we going to roll that into phase two? The vast majority of the benefits were delivered in phase one, with a few rolling into phase two and currently being delivered. So, and I suppose that's a real example of how, you know, we've worked with a client to deliver digital transformation. You know, some of, you know, the support that we offered was light touch, some of it was quite intensive. But I think, you know, throughout that, regardless of whether you work with someone external or whether you're doing this entirely in-house, there's definitely some learnings that, you know, we picked up from not only that example, but also from other clients who we've worked with within the sector and out with the sector as well. You know, a lot of the things that I'm about to talk about are agnostic. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're in social housing or whether you're in retail or whether you're in technology and media. The delivery of large scale transformation projects, especially when you're implementing new systems and ways of working, a lot of the issues are quite consistent, quite agnostic, although obviously there'll be nuance in terms of the sector that you operate in and the organisations that you're working within. So the first one, the first potential pitfall is testing. So I've never seen an implementation project where, you know, the testing process has been as slick as it could have been. It's, you know, it's one of these tasks, one of these areas where, you know, you've effectively got a supplier who knows their system from a design and configuration perspective, but you've then got a requirement to do user acceptance testing, and it often comes with a real, you know, specific skill set of tools and documents to support that, and then also crucially capacity to be able to deliver that testing program. And what we found at New Gorbals was that, you know, there was real work that we had to do throughout the project to develop those test scripts ourselves, working with the supplier, you know, to get their insight, but that we then had to have coordination of that testing program, and we picked up some of that work with them to sit alongside them and make sure that the testing was being delivered in line with expectations. So these are always questions that I would be asking at the start. You know, have we resourced this correctly? Do we have the types of skills and capacity to deliver a testing program ourselves? Because, as I say, often the supplier won't do it. It's too high risk, or, you know, they expect the organisation to be able to deliver it because it's user acceptance testing. It's sort of, you know, as it says in the tin, I guess, to an extent. The next one is project ownership and resourcing. And again, I've already mentioned this a few times. You know, do we have the people assigned to support this project? You know, and that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, we throw in all of the managers that we can at this. We need people who have an insight into the operational processes and policies. So that might not actually be at the management layer. It might be people who are close to processes. It might be people who've, you know, been doing it for a long time and have an insight into how things work. but also a mindset to be able to change and to recognise that this is an opportunity to do things differently as well. And I guess the key point there on that first bullet is, are we giving them the ability and authority to make decisions and facilitate efficient design decision making? So are we giving them the authority to go and make decisions on behalf of the team? And then the second point there around, governance effectively, do we have the right structures in place, and do we have an oversight layer within the project to ensure that the project itself is being held to account, that there's a different lens on project progress, people who are able to ask slightly different questions maybe than the sort of day-to-day activity, and also to set that tone at the top and make sure that people are across the organisation understand why we're doing this, kept abreast of the project progress, and kept abreast of benefits and what they can expect from the project. There's then data quality and management, and as I said at the beginning, data quality is often a real challenge in any organisation. In housing, we gather tons of data all the time. Customer data, we've got a lot of customer data that we collect at application stage, onboarding stage. We collect data throughout the life cycle of a tenancy. We also have a lot of property information, data on asset management, compliance checks, health and safety. We've got financial data on rent accounts, etc. And there's a couple of things here to really grapple with in terms of technology implementation. The first here is, do we have the capacity and skills to be able to cleanse our information and understand the quality of our data? So new systems implementations are often a great opportunity to pause and say, right, do we have an ability here to try and use this as an opportunity to cleanse what we currently have? It's also an opportunity to understand and map, where we have information in the organisation and where those pockets of information and data sit, and identify whether there's any risks and opportunities relating to that. And then also about understanding how seamless or otherwise is this migration going to be between our current data sets and the systems that we're implementing into. So there might be easy mapping across from the two. It might be a complete, redesign of the data model and understanding, well, actually, we need to completely rewrite how we want to collect and store information. And then it's actually a case of, bringing that data across in a way that's seamless enough. So, there's lots of things around that. So it's about capacity and understanding. Do we actually understand the challenge, and do we have the capacity to deliver it? Another crucial thing here to get right before we even start the project is key decisions relating to data, right? So what are we actually bringing across, and how much of it is often a question that gets missed, and we end up bringing over everything, even when we don't need to. It's something that we've been working with a client recently on, and they've got, decades of data sitting there, or they've got at least, data there that doesn't need to come across. So it's how much do we need from a finance perspective? It might be current year, -1. You might need more than that, but we might be able to store it elsewhere in a data warehouse, for example. So it's about making these decisions in advance, engaging with the business crucially around how much data they need to be able to perform operationally. And then there's a point here around dependencies. So if we go around changing things, have we mapped whether there's dependencies in other parts of the business? So if we change something in Department A, does it impact Department B? And then also, crucially, and this is one that often gets missed, is how will we be managing data during downtime and cutover periods? So as we're starting to go live, how do we make sure that we're still able to collect and process information either off system or within another environment, to make sure that, if we've got periods of downtime, that we're not just at a standstill operationally, or if we are, then how do we communicate that with our customers? And one of the other areas that we often see, I was going to say it gets forgotten about. I think everyone goes into a project without quite a clear understanding of what we're aiming to achieve, or at least thematically, right? So we're aiming to achieve more efficient process. We're aiming to make people's lives easier, at work. We're aiming to try and deliver better customer services. The benefits that we look to deliver with these projects are often quite similar, but what I've seen is a wide variety of discipline and effectiveness around how we actually understand and track benefits. So I suppose some key questions here. The first question really is, do we know what we want to achieve? Have we documented that? Have we written down, these are the requirements and expectations that we have of this implementation, both from a technical requirement, so we expect the system to do X, Y, and Z, but also from a benefits perspective. So we expect to deliver A, B, and C from a benefits perspective, in that we're aiming to reduce the number of the amount of time it takes to process an application, for example. Well, how have we quantified that, and how are we going to review whether that's been delivered? Again, the second point here is, as a project takes place, as we get into a live project, there's always going to be issues arising. There's always going to be decisions to be made around, whether our requirements and expected benefits are still relevant. Once the rubber meets the road with a project, we're into project delivery. Do we ever need to do any formal change control around benefits and requirements? Because there's nothing worse than saying, we're going to deliver all these benefits. The project happens. There's issues within the project. There's change in expectation around what we're going to deliver that isn't formally documented and communicated, and we then end up with a product at the end that we didn't expect, or that not all stakeholders expected. It's about that golden thread, I suppose, throughout, and making sure that if we are changing our expectations throughout, that we're documenting that. And then again, at the end of the project and throughout the project, do we have a process in place to be able to determine whether we're meeting the requirements and expectations of the project at the start? And the crucial kind of stakeholder here, there's obviously internal stakeholder relationships to manage within expected benefits, but equally, the supplier relationship here is key. A lot of the time we have an internal set of requirements and benefits, but we do need the supplier to engage with those and make sure that those are realistic from the outset, and that they're bought into being able to contribute to that realization piece at the end, to say, yeah, this was a joint effort to deliver these requirements against these requirements and these benefits, and we have done that. And that's one of the things that we did at New Gorbals, which worked really well. The supplier was able to support us in that benefits realization piece, and it was a joint effort, reporting that back to the board and ultimately the management committee. And then the last area is project and change management. So we often find that the project management role is one that is done at the side of a desk, or is at least begins at the side of a desk. And I suppose here it's just a watch out for, making sure that we've got the time, the capacity in order to deliver the day-to-day project management tasks and responsibilities. And I suppose that second point there is around clear delineation between project management, project board and governance, project sponsor. Often the IT and technology lead needs to take a slightly different role as well, making sure that the solutions fit within the target architecture and infrastructure. I've got a question there about data warehousing, making sure that those solutions are correct, and that we're able to deliver the types of data warehousing that we need, and broader architecture, and also that we've got subject matter experts there in order to deliver the project as well. So it's really about making sure that we've got clear roles, responsibilities, and clear delineation between some of those technical roles, project management roles, and also governance roles as well. So I'll now hand over to Paro, who's going to speak to us a little bit about the VAT requirements around digital transformation, and then we should have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. Paro, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. If you want to drive the slides for me, please. Thank you.
Will do, yeah.
Yeah, so I think over the sort of next 10 minutes, what I thought it would be useful to do was take a slightly deeper dive into one of the specialist areas that Chris was referring to in terms of transformation, and particularly transformation of finance systems. I think it's clear to say that anyone that works in the tax or finance team will agree that the case for the early consideration of VAT is absolutely clear. You know, that it's a really strong business case. And I think, you know, pulling out some of the common benefits for you guys is around releasing time. You know, transformation typically in finance should be around giving you more time to add value elsewhere in the business. And this is all about driving efficiency, giving you improved controls and transparency. You know, at the heart of this, a transformation, at the end of the transformation, our priority as tax specialists is to ensure that the data we get is right at source. Now, the reason for that is not only to be compliant, but, you know, good transformation will mean that we're reducing errors, that we're mitigating penalties and interest, we're ensuring that we're paying VAT at the right rate and at the right time, i.e. not overpaying, and where necessary, it gives you an opportunity to design a process that addresses your specific needs. So for some clients, they want to lock down posting abilities or access to tax codes, because these are the things that trigger all the anomalies that suck up time. I think ultimately what a finance transformation, and particularly if the VAT gets dealt with correctly, you end up with better data, right? And the better data means you get your compliance done more efficiently, more effectively, but the better data gives you visibility of where your costs are, where your time is going. And, you know, with the reports that are available and dashboards, if you sensitize the data enough, these can help you to be more proactive in the planning around the business. You know, where are your, it will give you data on where your biggest VAT costs are, where, and then give you the option to take time to make decisions on how to reduce those costs or manage those costs. It'll allow you to identify anomalies at a much earlier stage, as well as, I said, reducing errors. Now, if that's the start point, why do we not see more successful VAT transformations? Well, in my experience, as Chris said, there's normally a project team. Now, quite often the key messages I get back is tax was not considered early enough in the process, or not at all. You know, other feedback is we've had to implement manual workarounds because the finance product that was chosen didn't fully meet our needs. And in the worst case, I've had cases where clients have said, look, from a tax perspective, we're no better off. And in one case, a client said it was actually worse. So what I'm going to do is just take you through 5 critical things, steps that you can take as a finance team, as a VAT manager or a head of tax, that will help you get ahead of the game. Thanks, Chris. Perfect. Now, the first of these phases is what we like to call discovery. Now, I know Chris has been through some of these themes, but I think from a VAT perspective, what is critical is that the business here, i.e. the tax teams, take an opportunity at some point to step back and map your current processes. Now, for those of you that have worked in housing for a period of time, right, you'll be aware that you're currently dealing with a mixture of legacy systems with different costs and supplies going from different systems. That could be from the housing management system, it could be from your procurement system, you might have a separate client or staff expenses system. But, you know, mapping all of the data flows from your existing architecture will help you identify and clearly articulate at an early stage what your current problems are, where are they happening and why, and what your ideal solution looks like. And when I say ideal solution, I think this is about the art of the possible for you. And this might include, what are your non-negotiables? Your non-negotiables will be, clean, clear data and clear reports so that you are able to comply with making tax digital. You're not required to then have manual workarounds, and errors are reduced, as I said. On your wish list might be some level of automation. So you might automate reports of certain types for anomalies early in the process, in the finance process. Some clients ask for automation of partial exemption. That's complex, and in my experience, it's not the right solution for everyone, but put it on your wish list, because that allows you to step back, take a holistic view, and go to the table armed with the information that you need to take to the project team. And I think all of this prevents gaps, retrofitting at a later stage. So my advice is, do the discovery phase, irrespective of whether you're about to go into implementation, because I think there are other workarounds if there isn't a full ERP implementation process being undertaken. The second phase of the process, I would say, is around preparing for system specification and selection of, feeding into the selection of what bit of kit or software might be required. And at this stage, you would already have assessed your needs. And this process is about saying which systems are likely to be a good fit for us. Now, it's fair to say in the housing sector, not every system, I don't think I've come across a single system that does it all. So if you can tick as many of those boxes as possible, I think you're in a better position to have a successful outcome for VAT. One of the things that you will need to decide is, how much do you want? Do you want a high level of VAT sensitization so that the reports give you dashboards? Some people won't want that. Some people will want it to meet basic compliance requirements. And at that stage, of course, the question around automation of partial exemption arises. So moving on into system design and configuration, again, more often than not, I think this is the point at which a project team's been set up. People have been nominated or volunteered to join those teams. There is often someone from finance at the table, but in my experience, it's less likely to have someone from VAT at the table. But VAT, I think, in the housing sector is absolutely critical because of how many touch points there are in the business that are impacted by VAT and the large amount of costs that is at play. So I think absolutely, if you can get someone from the VAT team at the table, you're going to get a better outcome. And I think at this stage, this is the stage at which I think the use of an independent tax or VAT specialist becomes really valuable, because they provide an independent view at the table on the technical and the legal requirements. And the role of the person that's representing VAT at the table is one of quality assurance, okay? And their job is to make sure that the specifications that have been set out at discovery and the system specification stage are absolutely being met. Because as soon as we deviate from those specifications, the earlier you can escalate a requirement, the better. And I think this is where having someone independent at the table is quite effective, because they're more likely to really get those change requests in at the top table. And at this stage, I think it's fair to say, because VAT is such a technical issue, people don't want to talk about it. And one of the things that can facilitate understanding is a workshop. So typically we would facilitate a workshop that says, look, these are the requirements. This is why it's not working now. This is why we've selected the system, because the system says it can do A, B, and C. And this is why we now need these change requests, because we're falling short of those requirements at this stage. Now, once the system design and configuration has been completed, we move into the user acceptance testing phase. Now, at this point in the process, all your requests are being translated into scripts, which are written by the implementer, normally the software implementer. But your role as a client, or the role of your advisor, should be to ensure that all your key scenarios for VAT purposes are tested. Now, any quirks that you've identified in your system at discovery phase need to be addressed at this stage, right? And it's critical that those the user acceptance testing is done and feedback is given, because once those scripts are finalized and the system is accepting, changes, even if they are possible, will become costly and time consuming. You know, there are options for re-implementation, reconfiguration, and in some cases, tax may require a bolt-on at some point. Now, one of the examples I've got that commonly causes housing associations a lot of problems is the ability to process a reverse charge, for example. Most taxable businesses that SAP or Oracle or any other big provider has built the software for, this isn't an issue for, but it is an issue for us in the sector. And it's those sort of very specific quirks that we need to think about. As Chris has already said, once the system's gone live, again, the recommendation is to have a VAT super user at the table and have a support mechanism in place to test on a live basis the reports and the VAT return process and any dashboards that you get at the end of it. That's absolutely critical, because at that point you can potentially, this is the period in which you can reconfigure whilst you're in that parallel run between the old system and the new system. At this stage also, if it's gone beyond the point of being able to fix it or have a major fix, then the role of the VAT team there is to understand why the differences or the gaps are there, so that they can then build in the manual workarounds to be able to do what they need to do from a VAT perspective. So I think, you know, hopefully this has been useful, but early consideration of that will add benefits, reduce time and effort, and really overall, from a holistic point of view, support a successful implementation. Chris?
Great, thanks, Parol. We've now got about sort of 10 minutes for Q&A. There's a couple of questions already coming in through the chat, which is great, which I'm happy to pick up on. But Parol, you know, feel free to jump in if you get anything specific from a VAT perspective. So the first question's from Paul Davies. So what kind of data warehousing solutions do you tend to offer / suggest? I suppose, Paul, often depends. We would never sort of suggest or offer a data warehousing solution, and I suppose there's a couple of things to add before kind of considering what works best. But I guess the first thing would be target architecture and applications portfolio. So what are we looking to achieve? You know, are we looking to get everything into the cloud? Are we looking to reduce technical debt? And you know, those types of questions will help drive some of that decision making. Some that we've seen in the sector recently are Snowflake, SQL Server, and Amazon Redshift. So you know, there's there's always merits, and a lot of organizations will purport to be the best in security or the best in flexibility. So it's really about understanding your requirements to then assess the market based on those. I guess in a way it's horses for courses. But I think another area that often gets missed when we're considering how we're going to store our data is also how we're then going to present that. So I'd be looking at BI tools as well alongside the specification for your data warehouse, and understand how ultimately is this going to reach the end user, the decision maker or management layer, to basically drive how you want that whole data architecture to look. Because ultimately we're talking about how we surface intelligence at the end of the day. So I think combining those two things, and as Parol just mentioned, doing that piece early and doing it alongside your spec and select for systems as well, because it often becomes just an add-on at the end, right? It's like, oh, and also we store it here, as opposed to, no, we would like our data to look like this. How do we build an architecture and landscape around that? I saw a thumbs up, so hopefully that answered the question, but feel free, offline or whatever, to get in touch and we can discuss it in more detail. Another question was about the internal user experience. So from Chris Coppenhall. So what's the best approach to ensuring new systems deliver a good user experience while providing functionality prior to UAT? So the example that Chris has given is that a system might deliver a function, i.e. move from X to Y. However, it takes 20 clicks for a user. I think this is a tricky one, but it comes down to that business analysis and process analysis piece in advance. So if we can add metrics to things, to processes, so things like 20 clicks or however many steps it takes to deliver a process, how long it takes as well, which is often quite difficult because there's sometimes variation, or really significant variation in process. But the more intelligence that we can get on how processes are currently performing, with then a view to how we reduce time, effort, clicks, for example, and steps, then that should give us a sense of whether we're delivering the benefits for internal users that we should be. And equally, in design and configuration. So one of the things I mentioned during the pitfalls piece is, having people that know the process within your design and config is so crucial, because they can probably give you a sense of whether this process, the way we're designing it, is better, or areas that we do want to focus on. And I think the last point on that is there will be trade-off, right? So no system that I've seen within the sector is a panacea, right? It's not going to deliver absolutely everything without any trade-off. So it's about really understanding, we might have additional clicks in one area, but that might then allow us and enable us to automate back end of the process, which then saves time in the long run. So it's looking at those specific chunks of the process, but also looking at it in its entirety. And that, as I say, comes down to business analysis and doing that upfront investigation and discovery piece well. What project management software did you use? I mean, there's tons out there. I've used Monday.com. I've used ClickUp recently, which is really good, very task based. With New Gorbals, we used Microsoft Project, so we managed the project through that. And had regular catch-ups using a RAID log, so effectively going through risk assumptions, issues, and dependencies, and understanding how we were managing those based on a task by task basis. So that was where we got the full team together and made sure that tasks were being closed out. And we also had regular engagement with the supplier as well, which is crucial because it gives you their perspective on how the project's going to. And then a question from Eve Dustin. So mentioned that you had buy-in from management and operations. How did you get that buy-in? Was it purely from doing the training, or was it more difficult? I think so. There was a couple of aspects to this. One of the benefits that we had going into the project was that things had become so difficult with the current situation that there was a general consensus that the business needed to move. So I appreciate, Eve, that might not be the case everywhere. There might be challenges. People might actually be quite happy with the way things are. I think one of the ways that we got additional buy-in throughout the project was the tone at the top. So we sat down with management at the very beginning, made sure that they were aware first and foremost of how big a project this was, how much resource and capacity it would require from the business, and also filled them with confidence in terms of how we would manage it and give them the assurance throughout that it was being delivered effectively. But I guess for the business, it was then about setting out those benefits and actually using the subject matter experts, the work stream leads on the team, to be the voice of the project within their own teams. Like, top down's fine, newsletters and bulletins and stuff about how the project's progressing, but you really need people within the team to be out speaking to colleagues, because they're talking about specifics around the process, around how things are going in their specific section, and engaging them within the design and configuration discussions and training and testing, etc. as well. So there's a bit of top down and bottom up, I guess, from a comms perspective. But as I say, we were quite fortunate in this situation where we had buy-in from the start because of the current situation.
Yeah, I think, Eve, the other things I would mention is, look, it's about building that business case up front, and the business case can be made up of several different aspects. One might be just, as Chris has said, timeline, what's the lifespan and cost of our current systems. I know lots of clients struggle with legacy systems where the upgrades are no longer supported, or if they are supported, they're really expensive and time consuming, or actually they're not supported at all and you need to then manually build patches. Essentially, it's all the workaround. So there's that piece. There is a piece around how long is it taking us in terms of the current system to comply with our basic obligations. You could do probably a time mapping exercise to say, look, it's taking us on average 25 days more a year to do this because of the system. We can release time and therefore cash. The other thing I think is around regulatory and any tax compliance obligations more broadly. Are you able to quickly and effectively provide the data in a transparent and auditable way that meets the requirements of all your stakeholders, whether it's funders, whether it's the regulator, whether it's HMRC? There'll be a whole number of organisations that you need to be doing that for. And then I think there's and what other value does the business as a whole add by having better data? It's that transparency point. Can we therefore then, get our duplicate payments identified earlier? Can we see the performance of our suppliers? Do I know what VAT rates I'm paying, and is this helping me to recover more VAT? So I think it's that broad business case that is required.
Thanks, Paro. That's great, and we've got a comment from Eve saying that's great. So thanks, really helpful. I think that's all for the questions, all the questions that we had. And last thing to say is obviously both Paro and I are more than happy to have a conversation in more depth in some of these areas and any other areas that we didn't get the chance to cover on the session. So our details should be on screen. We'll also follow up over email with our details as well. So if you do want to have a conversation with us, then more than happy to do so. And the last thing to say is thanks so much for making the time this morning to attend, and keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.